Once there was hope. Once there were champions who dared to stand against the darkness. They gathered in Icecrown Citadel, believing they could change fate, that they could stop the tide of death before it consumed the world. But fate does not bend so easily. In this timeline, there was no victory, no salvation, no last-minute intervention from the light. There was only the cold, unyielding will of the Lich King. And in the end, death claimed everything. It began in Icecrown. Tirion Fordring, the High Lord of the Argent Crusade, was supposed to be the key, the one who would shatter Frostmourne and turn the tide. But in this version of history, he never got the chance. As he raised his blade to strike, the Lich King was faster. A wave of frost encased Tirion in ice before the final blow could land. And then, with one swift motion, Frostmourne cleaved through his armor. The Ashbringer, the last beacon of hope, fell silent. The champions fought valiantly. Jaina, Sylvanas, Bolvar, the Horde, and Alliance's mightiest warriors. They struck with all their strength. But against the Lord of the Scourge, it was never enough. One by one, they fell. Some died outright. Others were forced to kneel, and those who resisted, they rose again, their eyes glowing a sickly blue, shackled forever to the Lich King's will. The Lich King did not merely kill his enemies, he took them, he made them his, and so, the greatest heroes of Azeroth became his greatest weapons. Jaina Proudmoore, once the strongest sorceress of her time, became the Frozen Queen, a deathly mistress of frost magic who turned entire armies to ice with a single wave of her hand. Sylvanas Windrunner, who had once fought so hard to free herself from the Lich King's grasp, had no choice but to kneel. In this version of history, she did not escape into the shadows. She did not defy him. Her soul, already tormented, finally broke. She became the Banshee General of the Scourge, leading dark rangers with hollow, empty eyes. Bolvar Fordragon, once meant to take the Lich King's place as a jailer of the damned, never got that chance. Instead, he was reforged as Arthas's first Death Lord, a creature of fire and undeath, unrecognizable from the noble warrior he had once been. With Azeroth's champions gone, there was nothing left to stop the tide of undeath. The Scourge spilled out of Northrend like a flood. The first to fall was Lord Aeron again. This time, there was no resistance, no Forsaken to defend it. The citizens of the Undercity were given a simple choice: surrender to undeath or be slaughtered. Most chose slaughter. From there, the plague spread. Gilneas, already weakened from years of internal strife, was overrun within days. The Worgen fought fiercely, but even they could not hold against an army that never tired, never rested, never faltered. Stormwind held for a time. King Varian Wrynn, the Lion of Azeroth, led his people in one last desperate stand. The city's gates were sealed. The priests of the light worked tirelessly to keep the plague at bay. The army fought until their blades were dull, their arrows gone. But it was not enough. On the fourth day, the gates of Stormwind crumbled. The Scourge poured in like a tidal wave. Varian fought on the front lines, cutting down dozens of undead with every swing of Charlemagne. But he was still just a man. In the end, he fell, not as a king, but as the Lich King's newest servant. His son, Anduin, barely escaped, carried away by a dying knight who gave his last breath to see the prince taken far from the city. Where he went, no one knew. But it did not matter. There was nowhere left to run. The Horde fared no better. The Orcs, the Trolls, the Tauren, they all fought with honor, but honor does not stop the dead. Orgrimmar stood defiant until the end, its gates holding firm for weeks. Thrall called upon the elements to aid his people, but the spirits had grown silent, afraid of what was coming. In the end, Thrall stood atop the cliffs of Durotar, looking down at the burning remains of his city. He had once sworn that his people would never be slaves again. And yet, as the Scourge marched through the streets, the last shaman of the Horde realized the truth. Death was the only master now. One by one, the great cities of Azeroth fell. The Exodar was torn from the sky before it could escape. Darnassus burned, its great world tree frozen and shattered. Yernforge sealed its gates, burying its people alive, hoping to outlast the cold. But in the end, not even the mountains could keep death at bay. Azeroth, once a world of war and strife, was now silent. The frozen lands stretched across every continent. The sun, once warm and golden, now barely pierced the thick clouds of frost and shadow. There were no more banners, no more factions, only undeath. But not even the Lich King's victory was absolute. For beneath the surface of the world, something else stirred. The old gods, trapped for millennia beneath the earth, had long whispered to the mortal races, seeking to corrupt them, to break their will. But now, there were no mortals left to corrupt, no minds to twist, and so they turned their whispers elsewhere. The Scourge had no free will, but the Lich King? The Lich King had always been a puppet of greater forces. Whispers crept into his mind, slow at first, then louder, stronger, until they were all he could hear. You were never the master, only another pawn. The frozen throne cracked. Shadows poured forth from beneath Icecrown Citadel, a force darker than even the undead tide that had consumed the world. And so, the war did not end. The Lich King had conquered Azeroth, but he had not won. He had simply ensured that when the end came, there would be no one left to stop it. There were whispers of survivors, hidden deep in Pandaria, locked away in the ancient halls of Ulduar, scattered among the stars. But if they existed, they remained silent, watching, waiting. One day, perhaps, they would rise. Perhaps they would challenge the dominion of death. Or perhaps Azeroth's fate had already been sealed. The wind howls through the frozen wasteland. The world is quiet. The world is dead. And on his throne of ice and sorrow, the Lich King watches, waiting, for there is nothing left to conquer, nothing left to take, only silence, only death. This has been another deep dive into Warcraft's greatest what-ifs. If you enjoyed this alternate history, be sure to like, subscribe, and tell us what scenario we should explore next.